Hey everybody, it's another episode of the Feminist Survival Project. I'm Emily Nagoski.
And I'm Amelia Nagoski.
And today we are here to talk about
Rage.
A maligned, misunderstood emotion with which I have always had pretty good relationship, and Amelia not so much. So The question that we get asked about rage is basically what to do with it. When you feel the rage, it's like Mr. Rogers says, what do you do with the mad that you feel? We will give our evidence-based and experience-based answers to that question of what you do with the rage that you feel. The reason this is so important to us is I recently led a workshop full of super high-achieving women, and we were just doing the REST worksheet, which is this 24/7 calendar, 7 days of a week, from all the 24 hours of the day on the calendar. And you fill it in with all the things that you are doing and try to find places for adequate rest and self-care and connection with people that you care about. And a large part of people's reaction to the process of filling in the worksheet was, they said, rage. They were furious at the cultural pressure that had been put on them to include all of these things on their calendar that were not energizing, that did not make them feel awesome, that weren't actually priorities, except insofar as it met other people's expectations. So they were confronting the abyss, which, like we said, rage is one of the primary experiences people have in response to the abyss. And that was the moment when I was like, oh, a key difference in the way we talk about wellness is that we don't ignore the fact that the path to peace is through rage. You've got to process all the rage and despair you feel when you confront the reality that you spent decades of your life being lied to and behaving as if those lies were true, which is like, that's normal. You're going to be angry and frustrated and grieving about that reality. And it's a process that you move through more than once. It's an inevitable part. Feelings are tunnels. You have to go all the way through them to get to the light at the end. That's actually going to be the answer. In the end is you go through the tunnel to get to the light. And every time you get yourself into the tunnel, you keep going through until you get to the light.
Right. And I think it's important that we talk about, particularly in this episode, that the light at the end of the tunnel is not the final destination. You're not going to be like, oh, and now I'm in the light and I will stay in the light for the rest of my life. You go out into the light and take a breath and then back into the tunnel again. And that is not a problem. It's not a failure. It's just true.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
It is. And that's the beautiful thing about being in the tunnel is that, you know, as long as you keep going, as long as you allow your body to go through the process, you're going to get to the light at the end and you're going to spend some time in that light.
Yeah.
And sometimes the tunnel is deeper and darker than others. Sometimes you never lose sight of the light. And then other times you dissolve into the darkness.
You say the path to peace is through rage, and that's true, but your path to peace is not a path to a destination.
Where you're going to stay.
Getting to peace is like being on the launch pad. Because you got rid of the rage and you moved through all of that, now you're in a place where you can go to another thing. It makes you available for more stuff.
You go to the next, it's like leveling up.
Yeah, exactly. You're leveling up, and now like you have the strength you need to get to the next thing that you have to do.
There's going to be rage there too.
There's going to be rage there too, and there's going to be grief, and there's going to be joy. But unless you get out of the rage, you can't get to the peace that allows you access to everything else.
So Amelia and I have very different relationships with rage. And Amelia, I think, has a more typical story.
Yeah.
Rage is a feeling that women are not granted access to. Culturally, We're not allowed to be mad. We have to manage our emotions so that we don't make other people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Insert human giver syndrome here. Our job is to be pretty happy, calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others. And if we dare to be frustrated even, much less angry or enraged, then we're making other people uncomfortable with our big feels, and that's not okay.
No, other people's comfort is much more important than our actual real feelings.
And we know from the very first episode and the second episode, separating the stress from the stressor and completing the cycle, rage is a stress response cycle. It is the fight of fight or flight. So the answer is, when the fight response gets activated, what you do is complete the cycle, regardless of what activated that stress response.
Find some outlet for the fight, for getting that out of your body and moving your body through the sensation of ah into a sensation of ah.
So even though the answer is the same, because rage is so culturally punished, it is so not permitted, people feel some ways about the rage that they feel and find it more difficult to apply this idea of separating the stress from the stressor and completing the cycle for this specific emotion. So can you begin when you first recognized you had rage?
It was when I got out of the hospital and I was like so sick that I had to find out what was going on. So here I was backed into a corner and how am I going to get out? I read a bunch of stuff and then I was like, rage. I discovered it in the reading and I was surprised. I would not have told you. Oh yes, I have rage. I didn't even think that rage was really real. I thought it was like a movie thing, like you use it as action heroes experience rage and villains experience rage. And it was really only like an imaginary thing.
Like if it happens, it's a mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, if you think you're in rage, that's because you're performing rage. I didn't think rage actually was internal. I don't know. I didn't get it. I was so out of touch. So we talked in the last episode-ish about my rage fridge, that I have to confront bigots when I see bigotry in action. I have to say something because I no longer have the capacity not to, because when I feel the rage, I used to be able to just I didn't just have a rage fridge in the past.
You were a rage fridge.
I had a basement full of rage, like in boxes and in refrigerators.
Like one of those creepy walk-in freezers with like carcasses in it?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yes. And an attic full of rage. And I do think that if we're looking
You were a rage hoarder.
100%. If we're looking at the house as a metaphor of the self, like Jung does, like places in your mind versus places in your literal bowels and places in your feet, there's this generalization you can make that when you have a dream, for example, if you dream about things in the basement, it's something like lower in your body. So if this kind of symbolism works for you, great. Because it turns out actually things like rage and all these other repressed emotions end up in specific places in your body. For me, especially in the stage where I was hospitalized, it was in my lower back. I would throw my lower back out. I wouldn't be able to walk for several days. And that was very specifically rage. And there are other things like there's, some fear in my knees and I have grief in my shoulders, and it goes to very specific places. So the idea that the rage is in the basement was very real.
And I want to insert a little science here in case that sounds a little too
hippy-dippy woo-woo. Believe me, oh my God, if I had heard someone say that this is Amelia again, if I had heard someone say that to me before I was in the hospital, I would have been like, whatever. That's such, okay, it's a metaphor or something. I would not have believed it. And now, oh my God, it's so literally true.
When we talk about Amelia carrying rage in her body, what we're talking about is her carrying incomplete stress response cycles in her body so that everything is inflamed physiologically. Her digestive system is slowed down. Her reproductive system is slowed down. Her immune system is doing bananas crap in her body. And that is... So her entire body chemistry is out of whack, which leaves her prone, first of all, to interpreting every sense. So her brain is going to receive every sensation as if it's a potential threat, as if it's a danger. So pain is going to be everywhere in her body. And also there's literal damage being done to her organs by the fact that she's sustaining this state of activation of the stress response. So we don't mean in this area, like you carry feelings in your body. Like it's, we mean, no, seriously, your chemistry is different.
In your body, yes, yes. And I think that the way that there are areas of your brain that seem to be related to certain kinds of approaches to thinking, like your cognitive stuff is up front, and then the like sort of fear and joy and the kind of mammalian and lizard feelings are like in a different part of your brain. There's a kind of locality to the way we understand the world. And there are actually connections to certain parts of your brain and certain parts of your body. And I think people haven't studied this. This is not science now. But there is a kind of locality to how we feel feelings and process the world.
Vinyasa yoga practitioners definitely are like, in your hips, you carry this in your forearms, you carry this kind of stress, you're going to notice this being released.
Right. So this is the idea behind acupressure, for example, which is part of the Chinese medicine practice that my Tai Chi practice is part of, where if you massage someone's feet, there are very specific places on the foot that connect to certain organs in your body. There's a theory that those nerve endings by the foot are also part of a nerve system that goes past that organ and up to the brain. Like maybe there's a physical connection. This is all very new, but that's the idea behind it.
So your first step was being so inflamed that your body shut down and you thought you were going to die. Mm-hmm. And then I gave you some science and you were like, oh.
The science says rage.
Yeah.
The science says rage? That was shocking to
me. How did you feel about it?
I was shocked. I collapsed in a puddle on the floor. Literally just
that was the point that you called me and you were like, how could it be true that...
Yeah.
And I was like, how could you not?
Right. Yeah. Because like my job as a conductor is to express emotion with my body. So like, where did I think the emotion was coming from? And if it's in my body, like I had kind of accepted that there's emotion in my body when I conduct, but like, why wouldn't it be there the rest of my life? Well, you know why I didn't think it was there the rest of my life? Because Jesus Christ, that would be so much rage. Oh my God. If I have rage in my body that I've never noticed before, that means all the rage ever, like from my childhood, from the way those jerky bitch, popular girls talk to me, to like the times when I had to shut up and keep quiet, and like family situations, to like all my jobs that I'd ever had where I had to like be polite to a boss. Oh my God. All of that rage is in oh my God, no wonder I ended up in the hospital. It was a fucking miracle. I wasn't actually dead. So yeah. Then I started working to like scrape the rage out. I would do visualizations where I'd just be like, go into my mind. And my mind would show me the inside of a grill with like char and grease. And I would just physically scrape it out. And
so you're not physically scraping it out. What are you doing?
I'm imagining.
So mentally you're visualizing scraping the char off the grill.
Yeah.
And how do you feel physically in that moment that you're imagining that?
I get lighter. Physically, I actually feel more open and light.
In the process?
In the process of it. I can feel it. Yes.
You don't like sit there with your eyes closed sobbing?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. But like at the same time.
I always do.
But it isn't like an unpleasant kind of sobbing. It's just like I'm crying because it's just part of the tunnel.
It's just a release.
It's just a release. It's not like it feels like okay kinds of crying. So it's not like.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel painful.
I don't understand what not okay kinds of crying is because I'm apparently a freak. But for like, this is a time when crying doesn't feel unnatural or like it's something you shouldn't be doing.
It feels like it's a purgation.
Yeah. So the imaginative process of scraping off the grill is connected to the physical process of the crying, and it's cleansing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, do you want to talk about poop?
Yeah. I want to talk about poop. We kept it in our book because we know that it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
If you're
listening and eating, like maybe put it in the fridge for a second or like fast forward a little bit. But like just a little warning, we're going to talk about poop because let's do it. Emily, I do not like it when Emily uses the simile that your emotional systems are like your digestive system, that if you stop it halfway through, bad things happen. I don't, it feels like icky, and I don't think that people want to hear that. But so like, since we've given you a warning and made a little space, let's talk about that.
Because there's a reason we use that as an analogy.
It's not just an analogy. It's also literally
true. And we have heard a lot of stories from a lot of women.
So many
from
stories.
Multiple different nations.
Yeah.
About poop because we talk about it. Yeah. About the ways their digestion
immediately reflects their state of mind.
Yeah.
In like a broad, large scale way. Not how you feel right now, but how you're feeling this season.
Yeah. So like last December, we had finished writing Burnout. Uh-huh. And I was taking the month of December off, and my body decided that it wanted me dead. And I spent the entire month constipated and taking laxatives, stool softeners, and with intense abdominal pain literally every day. Yeah. Not like you had,
No.
But my body was clearly like going through
acute,
something.
right.
And needed me to turn toward it with kindness and compassion and also leafy green vegetables.
Yes. And water.
Yeah, and water. And that, like, what I learned in that month is that I am designed to digest leafy green vegetables and water, and everything else is basically just a topping for the leafy green vegetables and the water.
Yeah.
And like that's what my body needed in order for it to get rebalanced from all the stressors I had put it through in 2018.
The story we use in the book, our composite character, Julie, is a composite character. So like lots of things about her situation are true, but just not for all the same person. So what she goes through is here comes some gross words. So like, take a big breath. Here we go. Julie experiences a fecal impaction. Yeah. So we talk about how in your fight or flight response, your digestive system shuts down. If your digestive system stays shut down for too long, you're not passing material through your intestines. Your colon is like, no, thank you, and stops. And you know what happens then? Like poop stays in your body and builds up into a large lump, obstruction, possibly lump, very likely. And so the story we tell in the book where she has to go to the emergency room and it's manually digitally scooped out is a real thing. That really happens. It is an extreme end of constipation, like a vast
we
number.
know multiple people to whom it has happened because we've started telling this story and people are like,
oh yeah, I had that. Well, it also happens in pregnant women a lot. There's a lot of pressure on the intestines. Like that's may or may not be emotionally induced, but like if you don't have any other risk factors, I mean, intense stress is actually one of the risk factors, like going through a divorce or moving, which are the things that are going through in Julie's life.
In the book,
yeah. Yeah. So people talk about, oh, she's anal retentive or like, Yeah. Like that's real stuff. And that's an extreme example, but everybody has had spells of diarrhea or constipation for no particular food-based reason, or there's no obvious like
there's
external
no infection.
But it's emotions.
Your stress response is activated in your body, which is throwing your digestive system out of whack.
Yeah.
And it needs some time and some loving attention in order to get back into
you
whack.
You can eat all the leafy greens and all the water in the world, but if you're still in fight or flight, your digestive system is not going to help you out.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about poop, baby. Let's talk. Yeah.
So, bet you weren't expecting that when you clicked on the Rage episode. But it turns out it shows up in an enormous number of women, which is why we found it important to talk about.
Yeah, IBS is overwhelmingly a problem for women, irritable bowel syndrome. And you know what the medical intervention is for IBS? Keep a food journal. Find out what foods correlate to when you experience a flare-up. And then you can infer causation from that, which is so not scientific that even I, the musician, am sort of angry about it. But let's talk about the ways that like maybe keeping not just a food journal, but like an emotion journal. Like what has happened that you're experiencing in your feelings when you experience a flare-up.
And I want to mention here that this is the point at which people are either going, yes, the mind and the body are so closely connected.
The mind-body relationship.
Or they're saying, you can go fuck yourself because you're saying that my disease is in my head, that my pain is in my head,
it's
that my
not
problem
in your
is
head.
in my head. No, the thing is, we talk about the mind-body connection. It's not that there's a mind and a body and a connection. It's that you are one thing. You are an embodied mind.
Yeah.
Your emotions live in your body.
Yeah. I think
Rage is one of them.
Dan Siegel's definition of the mind is that it's the embodied and relational process that regulates energy and information flow. Your mind, yourself, your identity is not just within your skin. It's also very much influenced by and is your interaction with your environment.
Your mind is your interaction with your environment. Did you get that? He has a PhD and works at Harvard, so you can definitely take him seriously. He's written a lot of really, really wonderful books that we have found helpful in our process of understanding what's going on in the brain and body.
Who are you talking about? Let me write this down. It's Dan Siegel. We'll put links in the thing.
Links in the show notes.
He does work with Jack Kornfield.
Yeah, Jack Kornfield.
Who is all about the mind-body connection. Another medical professional who treats, a lot of things, but approaches it through like, hey, meditation's going to help you with this medical problem. Turns out it's not hippy-dippy, woo-woo, ya-ya thing. It turns out it's literally physiologically true because emotions are cycles that happen in your body, and things that happen in your body change the way your body feels.
So when you experience rage, this is our how-to, right? You notice that it is happening.
First of all, you have to acknowledge that it's a real thing, and you might have to learn how to notice. I did. It took me...
How'd you do it?
It just took practice. It was a mindfulness practice, really, of like paying attention and remembering in the moment to turn toward my actual physical body and seeing how it feels. I was one of those people who would work so long and forget to pee, and then all of a sudden realize, like, I need to pee, like, immediately. Like, I would just forget and not notice. So I had to learn how to notice, which is just, it takes practice.
So how do you begin practicing?
Well, you could just notice how you feel right now.
So you just sort of drop into noticing how you feel right now for 10 seconds once an hour?
That's way too much. No. I would do it like in the car or when I'm brushing my teeth or like in a regular thing. My therapist had me start with when I'm brushing my teeth, pay attention to just brushing my teeth, which is a very common thing.
John Kabat-Zinn talks about that. Yeah.
But the thing is that once you start, anytime you, like, if you just turn right now and pay attention to how your body feels right now you've learned that skill and you can do that. You just have to remember to do it again sometime later. You can remind yourself, set a timer on your phone or whatever. But once you've started doing that, it's nice. And it opens up your capacity to do more. So none of this is really about like, this is your solution and here's how you're going to win. It's once you've learned that one thing, you do it once and you see, oh, that's really good. I want to do some more of that. Or, oh, that's really bad. I better do some more of that. Like, either way.
So this is the part where I'm going to insert the story of a former student of mine. I was traveling all over, and this woman who had been my student came to a public event, and we went out for drinks after, and she told me this story. She was like, Emily, you were always like, mindfulness. It's good for you. Try mindfulness. And I finally did. I tried mindfulness. And I like dropped my attention down in a neutral way into my body. And it was terrible down there. And I was like, why would I want to spend time paying attention to that? Yeah. It is terrible there. So she kept, like, every now and then she'd periodically try mindfulness, turning toward her internal experience with kindness and compassion. And inside her body, it was just sirens and flashing red lights and wee-oo, wee-oo. And so it's no surprise that she didn't want to. And she finally had the idea that, hey, maybe this isn't actually normal. So she went to a doctor. And she got diagnosed immediately, which is very rare, with fibromyalgia. She had been in intense physical pain for years and just not let herself pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Her body was screaming for pain. Yeah. And every time she heard that cry, she was like fingers in her ears, Lala, I have work to do. I'm strong enough to get through this. It's going to be fine. Nothing is wrong. Blah.
Yeah. And that perspective is rewarded over and over again. If you ignore your pain and you're a strong woman,
pain is weakness leaving the body.
Like,
fuck you.
That's all of that is wrong because it'll get you through to a certain point. That hardness to suffering, it'll get you so far, but then you're just going to crack and break open and then you'll be done and you won't be able to be of any use to anybody else for the rest of your life. So if you want to stay participating, turn toward the pain and like feel the suffering and get help. Do whatever needs to happen
to go through it so that you can get to the end of it.
Launch pad to go to the next level.
So what do you do with the mad that you feel?
I do lots of things. I have to do lots of things. If I just do one thing, that's not enough. I have so much rage.
You've got a backlog.
I've got a backlog that I'm still dealing with the first 30 years of rage. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not done with that. Like, not even close. So the new rage that I get, like, I also immediately deal with.
Process it right away.
Right away. I go to therapy and I talk it through. I write a song about it. I do yoga with Jessamine.
Jessamine Stanley, Underbelly Yoga. This is an app, a $10 a month app that we both subscribe to.
Yeah.
And it's a great way.
She's
to
so
purge rage.
real
She's
about the yoga
so real.
and how it feels and like what comes out of your body. Just like, yeah. Okay. So I do yoga with Jessamine. I also go horseback riding. I love that. It is so effective for me because it's everything at the same time. It is mindfulness. It is turning toward my body. It's recognizing that my body has stuff in it. And that stuff influences the people around me. And like, because this horse knows what I'm feeling and either is like a funny weirdo about it. Like he'll just stop if I'm kicking him and he just stops because like something in me doesn't really want to go. And that's what he responds to rather than my like kicky feet, kick. And he's like, girl, no, your ass says stop. And I'm like, yeah, my ass does say stop. And then I have to like find out what my ass is saying and why it's saying it. I'm sorry, it's my seat technically in horseback riding. It's your seat.
So you write a song, you go to therapy, you horseback ride, you yoga. Anything else? On the day after the election in 2016, you built a sidewalk.
I did.
You built a walkway.
We had just moved into a house and I went outside and I dug a trench, like a 2-inch deep, 1 foot wide, 12-foot long trench. And I filled it with a pile of gravel that we had sitting, what was waiting for this purpose. And then I laid walking stones on top. It took about an hour and 15 minutes. And I just worked until my muscles burned, until my breath was like really heavy. And I completed a task. I made a thing. And that kind of, look, I made it. I accomplished something.
You can't control everything, but you did this.
I did that. And what it took to do it was this like heavy labor that was very exhausting. So I kind of like purged that particular cycle. But that's also the week that I had not been in therapy since I moved. So I found a new therapist that week. Yeah. And she said that I was part of a flood of new clients she was getting. All women. So what do you do, Emily?
With the mad that I feel?
What do you do? Mm-hmm. That's not how the song goes.
Yeah, I forget how it goes. What do you do with the mad that you feel? A lot of things. Crying is really important for me as a way to release it from my body. The yoga also works extremely well.
Okay, I take crying so much for granted that I didn't even think of it as a thing that I do.
Yeah, it's a first line of defense.
No, after Trump was elected, I cried every day.
Every day.
Not because I was particularly sad or grieving about a particular thing, but it was just a lot of feelings, and it's very effective just to get it all out.
Yeah, every day between the election and the inauguration, every day.
Yeah.
So crying is a first line of defense. The yoga is really good. I have to be careful with it after all the years of dance lessons that we took, and I took even more years of dance lessons than you did.
Yeah.
I get really performance focused about like, finding the bind and like stretching, getting my head to the floor, my hands to the floor. So one of the reasons I like Jessamine's app so much is she's super not focused on performance and stays focused on just like noticing what it feels like, getting juice and heat moving through your body and not having it be about like achieving the perfect posture, which isn't even possible for people with different body configurations.
Right.
So the yoga is helpful if I do it in that way. Physical activity is good. I will, when I'm in like a deep rage state, like when on the day after the inauguration, the first thing that this administration did was reinstate an even more draconian version of the global gag rule.
Yeah.
And that story got lost under all the bullshit about the size of the crowd.
Right.
And I was mad, first of all, about the policy itself.
Yeah.
And I was even more enraged that people
were distracted.
Were fooled by the distraction.
Yeah.
And didn't notice that women's lives globally were put on the line.
Yeah.
So and like what I do for a living is promote women's health. So it's like an existential rage that I was feeling. And I had this, I like exercised, but I cried, like sobby cry while I exercise. So I can't work out really hard because I can't breathe enough to work out really hard. So I work out sort of lightly. Imagine me on an elliptical machine, sort of slowly on an elliptical machine, like with my head hanging down, dripping both sweat and tears from my face.
Yes.
So that's me purging rage. It's not pretty.
No.
It's not fun.
No.
Does it feel good?
I think it feels good the way the pooping feels good.
Yeah. I mean, it feels neutral to me.
It's satisfying. It feels like that is the way it should be.
Yeah.
It didn't at first for me. I was like, this cannot be right.
No?
But now I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm like, this is.
So talk about the this can't be right feeling, because I think that's common for a lot of people and I've never had it.
Oh. Well, you get overwhelmed with like whatever and you just like burst into uncontrollable tears and the crying and you cannot stop it.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, first of all, you've been told your whole life, don't cry, honey. No, don't cry. Also, don't cry out loud and all that stuff. You've learned that crying is wrong and bad and shameful. So it can't be correct that you're dealing with your feelings the correct way if it makes you cry. So like you've learned over and over again, crying is wrong. This is incorrect. But as you do it anyway, because you're like, I don't know, these people told me that crying is supposed to be good for me, so I guess I'll try. And then you try, and then as you just kind of let yourself do it, you learn that this is the new normal, that this is, in fact, all those cultural messages were wrong. All those cultural messages were toxic to you, had been coming between you and your well-being. And then you feel mad about that. And then you cry some more and you're like, this is so useful.
And the most important thing, I think, is learning how to let the brake off. Trust your body to do what it needs to do. Yeah. Not judge it, because the judging just slows you down. It hits the brakes. Like, you have to go through the tunnel. If you go through it with the brakes on, judging it and criticizing it and feeling ashamed of it,
you're not going to get through it. You're still going to be in it.
You
and
might,
then you're
but
try
it's going to it'll just give you more crap to feel.
When I very first started, I had no finesse with the brake pedal. It was either gas or brake, or gas or brake. So I would become flooded and overwhelmed. And like, I didn't want to do that because I couldn't go back to being like a normal person for like 20 minutes. And it wasn't convenient. And it was
like, I literally don't have time for this.
I literally don't have time
for this. If I
this.
start, I'm not going to have time to get to the end.
Right.
So.
Right. And it first started on the podium. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to conduct and I have feelings. And like, I would just sob. This happened in conducting class a couple of times, but like everybody cries in conducting class because it's a conservatory and we all cry and that's just part of the deal. So it wasn't weird at that place, but I did have to learn like how to open the aperture of feelings just enough so that it wouldn't turn into a flood. But the thing is, because I had this rage attic and this rage basement, as soon as I opened the aperture, like the flood came. So I had to kind of clean out my attic and my basement so that I could open the aperture just slightly and it wouldn't be a flood. I could just like be like, hey, I'd like some grief right now.
Because when people are beginners at rage, it is important to
clear the backlog
and to like be careful and not let themselves get swamped and overwhelmed by it so that they can't cope with their life, and they end up get like sucked into the vortex of like, you end up not just looking at the abyss and recognizing it, but like lost down in it and in need of medical attention. Yes. Like, that's the real thing that happens.
Yes.
Is especially when people are trauma survivors, which you are.
Yeah. I also started antidepressants for the first time when I was at that conservatory doing that work. I was
noticed that you might be depressed.
I was drinking and crying and like drinking and crying, and
we're
that's
gonna have an alcohol episode.
That's how I was coping. And so I went to the counselor on campus, and he was like, well, have you been on antidepressants before? And I was like, no, I don't really like the idea of being on medication. And he was like, you prefer drinking and crying? And I was like, that's a valid point. So medication for me. So I feel like this should be 2 episodes. This is too much.
Well, I mean, what points have we made so far? Rage is real.
Rage is real. It happens in your body.
Had to have a reckoning where your body tried to kill you.
At some point, if you don't recognize that rage is real and allow yourself to move through the cycle, then you're going to build up the rage in your rage attic and your rage basement, and it's going to sit there in your body and destroy something like an organ.
Right. And we want people to be able to deal with rage the same way they deal with every other emotion, which is to separate the stress from the stressor and complete the stress response cycle. And the reason that's difficult...
In a place that's safe.
Right. In a place that's safe. And it's difficult for people with rage specifically because of all the cultural noise that has been planted in our heads about the rage. So how we feel about the rage is different from how we feel about stress or grief or broken hearts.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of conversation going on, like Rage Becomes Her and all those types of books.
Good
talking
Mad.
About like telling women, yes, your rage is okay. You haven't been given permission until now. Here's your permission. And then what?
And then what?
Do you what do you do with all that rage?
Stay mad all the time? Because you can't, you like physically,
that's
you
not
literally
good for
can't
You're not meant to do that.
Stay mad. You can stay connected to the ideas that are stressing you out, that are activating the rage. And when you experience the rage, you have to move through it so that you can get to a place of peace and balance and strength and health.
Okay, so going back to our steps. Step 1 was rage is real. 2 was
separate the stress from the stressor.
Yep. 3 is
complete the cycle.
Go through the tunnel.
Right.
4 is don't expect yourself to get to peace and be done
forever.
Like, now I have achieved peace and I'll never experience rage again. Assume that rage is a cycle and it's going to be every day.
Yeah.
I mean, literally every day.
Many people are going to have a backlog also of like rage refrigerators of different scales in your bodies.
Yeah.
And the reason that's the case is because how we've been taught to feel about rage is different from how we've taught to feel about our other feelings.
Specifically how women are.
Yeah, specifically women. Human giver syndrome.
Yeah.
Rage is the least human giver emotion.
Yeah. That's really a lot. But I mean, they're obviously all connected. I mean, it's the rage story.
This is the rage story. How practical is it to just be like, hey, P.S., you have rage? I mean, the Abyss episode was basically like, P.S., you have an abyss. The key is to just know that that's true. And turn toward it with kindness and compassion.
Yeah.
Basically, the moral of the story of every single episode is turn toward your internal experience with kindness and compassion.
Exactly.
It's harder
Despite
to do.
The fact that the world is telling you that your rage doesn't deserve compassion, your rage doesn't deserve kindness, your rage is forbidden and bad, and it makes you bad. And fighting that cultural narrative is hard.
Yeah. So if you manage to get as far as noticing that your rage is real, you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah. Because the thing is, once you know that it's real, and once you recognize when it's happening, then that opens a door to all this other stuff. And not right away. For me, it was a multi-year process of like academic reading in addition to like practicing Tai Chi and practicing yoga and But once you notice and once you know that it's real and once you understand that, oh, it's normal for me to feel rage and it's fine. And I don't have to like hide it. What I do is I turn toward it. Then automatically what's going to happen is you're going to be drawn through a journey with your rage.
And just to normalize the variety of experiences people have with rage, I have had the explicit experience since I was in high school of intentionally, deliberately settling down for some animal noises type sobbing in order to like release feelings from my body, whether or not a situation had been resolved. So I was already separating the stress from the stressor and like releasing the emotion through what my body was demanding from me.
Yeah.
And the point at which it got difficult for me was when I started being in relationships. And human giver syndrome kicked in with me in my relationship and applying the script of it's my job to meet everyone else's needs. And if the relationship fails, it's because I have failed in some way. And I had feelings about that, but those feelings didn't feel separate from the stressor. Like I had to solve the problem so that I could release the feelings. And the way I healed from that first destructive relationship was applying the same skill I already had of separating the stress from the stressor and going through the tunnel to the feelings I had in the context of a relationship. Oh. That was a new and difficult experience.
Oh.
That was also the relationship where it was a long distance relationship. I was 18. He was 26.
Oh.
Yeah. And later became my stalker. So
nice.
Fun.
Yeah.
Really bad. Extremely bad. I went to visit him where he lived, and that was awful. I took the bus back to where we lived at college, and I was alone in the house, like animal noise sobbing. And I was just like so physically tired from the demand of these emotions on my body. I turned on the TV and everything just quieted down. Like I just numbed out really profoundly. Yeah. And then I turned the TV off and the animal noises sobbing came back. Yeah. And I turned on the TV. Yeah. And it all went silent. So that was my first experience with pain management around emotions. We're going to have, Chronic. Just to give you a framework, healing emotional pain has 3 targets of intervention. One is to get rid of the actual cause of the pain. So if there's a knife in your body, let's take the knife out. That's one. A second is to heal the wound, which is the process of your immune system interacting with whatever medical structures there are on the outside or inside of your body in order to make the wound heal. And the third is pain management, numbing the pain enough for your body to be able to cope with the healing process so that you can live your life while your body is healing. So we talk about all 3 of those things, but especially those second 2 things. What are the things you can do to heal? What are the things you can do to numb the pain? And this episode has been about what are the things you do actually to heal the emotional pain of holding rage in your body, which is separate from the process of dealing with the knife that got stabbed into you that caused the rage to activate in the first place. And if there's a moral of the story for us, I think it must be that the piece that's been missing in the conversation in all these books is that the process of dealing with the knife is separate from the process of healing the wound in your body.
Right. That's why we had to write a whole separate book different from all those other books I read. Yeah. The reason no other individual book helped me is because none of the other ones put those 2 together.
So we had to talk our way. Like, we knew this was an important episode to do. Yeah. And it took us 40 minutes. To figure out why it was so important that we say the thing we have to say, which is that rage is normal and the way you deal with it is not by dealing with the knife. In fact, you can continue to heal even when there's still somebody out there with a knife.
Which there
have to. There always is. There always will be. Yes. And our goal is to make sure the knives of future generations are smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. And
that means we have to risk ourselves to the knife in order to, alleviate the future suffering.
And we also want to teach future generations more and more healing skills, more skills than we had coming into adulthood.
Yeah. Thing 1, rage is real and it's fine.
So let's, do you want to play the rage song and deliberately leave your ukulele out of tune because that's appropriate to the experience?
Yeah, stylistically.
All right.
Hold on, I need to move my sweatshirt. Okay.
Go for it.
Every morning.
Oh, God.
The sun. Is it that out of tune?
No, it's good. It's good.
Every morning.
But if even I can hear it.
The sun rises. And every evening. The sun goes down. And every day. The cycle continues. And every night. It starts again, just like my rage, everyday rage, normal rage. Every morning, the sun rises, and every evening, the sun goes down, just like my rage. And every day, the cycle continues, just like my rage. And every night, it starts again, just like my rage, just like my rage, just like my rage, my normal rage, everyday rage.
This has been the Feminist Survival Podcast. If any of it was written, not much of it was. It was by us. I'm Emily Nagoski.
I'm Amelia Nagoski.
If any of this was produced, it was produced by My Marital Euphemism, and music, of course, by
Amelia.
Thank you so much for listening. You can follow along with us on Instagram or Twitter at FSP2020. email us at feministsurvivalproject2020@gmail.com. Which kind of relationship with rage do you have? Is it like mine? This is Emily, where you like have always known and you could like animal cry or exercise and work it out?
Or like me, where you've had a rage attic. Do you still have a rage attic or a rage basement? Or are you working on cleaning it out?
Or are you somewhere in between? Because God knows we're two extremes.
Yeah, I think so.
And probably almost everybody is somewhere between.
Yeah. If you find anything helpful, please share and rate us on whatever platform you use to find us. And thanks for listening. You prefer drinking and crying? I was like, that's a valid point. So medication for me.